Welcome to Killer Women with your host, best-selling author Danielle Girard. And now, Danielle's next killer woman.
Hello, and welcome to Killer Women Podcast, a proud member of the Authors on the Air global network with more than 4 million listeners. I am your host, suspense author Danielle Girard, and my guest today is Lisa Gray. Lisa is an Amazon #1, Washington Post, and Wall Street Journal best-selling author and has sold over 1 million books. Her debut novel, Thin Air, was Amazon's third best-selling Kindle book of 2019. In 2020, she was longlisted for the McIlvanney Prize. Her books have been translated into 14 languages to date. Lisa previously worked as the chief Scottish soccer writer at the Press Association and was the books columnist at the Daily Record Saturday magazine. She is the author of the Jessica Shaw series and standalone thrillers The Darkroom and To Die For, which has been nominated for an ITW Thriller Award. Lisa lives in Glasgow and writes full-time. Welcome, Lisa.
Hi, Danielle. Thanks for having me.
So fun. So Lisa and I have known each other since since really your earliest books came out, right? Because we were both published by Thomas and Mercer, but we really only got to meet in person like last month because Lisa came to New York for her first Thriller Fest. I think we have her hooked. So before we get started, I finished the final act last night. Lisa, tell our listeners a little bit about this book.
So the final act tells the story of a young aspiring actress, Madison James. So she's like 19, she's quite naive, she's from a small town in America, and she arrives in Hollywood with these big aspirations to make it as a star. And at the outset, it all looks really good. She gets this kind of lucky break where she is cast last minute in a slasher movie. And she kind of thinks at that point, that's it, I've made it. This is me on the road to stardom. A few months after getting off the Greyhound bus, that this is it. And then she appears in 2 more movies, and then her career just flatlines. And we kind of fast forward 20 years to find Madison, who's now almost 40 years old. She's working as a waitress, but she's still never given up on this dream of being a Hollywood superstar. So she's offered an audition that she feels this could be the big break she's been waiting for this whole time, but she never makes it to the audition. And initially the police aren't too concerned because she's a grown woman and she's not a vulnerable adult. She's got no sort of medical or mental health issues. She's just not shown up to work for a couple of days.
Right.
She's not on her cell phone. Then a few days later, her belongings are found in a park by a TikToker.
TikTok star, right?
TikTok star or aspiring TikTok star. And at this point, the police get interested and we meet the 2 detectives from the LAPD missing person unit. The main one being Sarah Delaney, who previously worked homicide. This is her first missing persons case. And we also kind of find out a bit about her backstory as the book progresses. So really the book is told over 2 timelines. So we kind of get to know more about the young Madison in her early days in Hollywood. Yep. And the kind of a lot of quite dark stuff that happens to her. And we also follow Detective Sarah Delaney in the present day as she tries to unravel this past that may have led to this disappearance in the present day.
I know, I love that. And actually, there's also, somebody else a friend of hers that was also an aspiring actress. So there's a lot of mysteries that cross the 20 years. But I was such a huge fan of the Jessica Shaw series. I don't know if somehow I got my hands on Thin Air, and I'm not sure if it was to blurb it or what it was, but I got a chance to read it sort of like right at the beginning. And I loved that series. So can I ask, is Sarah Delaney, is it a series? Are you starting a new series?
So it's written as a standalone.
Yeah.
There's no real intention for,
Okay.
and there still isn't any plan for this to become a series. But what's quite interesting is that I've noticed from quite a few of the early reviews on NetGalley and Goodreads that quite a lot of people are saying they really enjoy this partnership
Yeah.
between Detective Sarah Delaney and her younger male colleague,
Right.
Rob. He's quite green. He's kind of like a reasonably new detective, and they quite like that interaction. So the funny thing is that I have actually seen quite a few reviews where people are saying, I really want to see more from particularly Sarah Delaney. We feel there's more to unpack about her backstory, because we do find out some bits of
Yeah. There's some,
terms of
and
her
she's got some,
personal life and
yeah.
things like that come up during the course of the book. So I mean, it's written as a standalone, but I suppose it's one of those ones, never say never. I do actually quite enjoy writing these sort of like detective duos, because you might remember like Jessica Shaw is the main character in that series, but there is also a detective duo in that as well. Her friend Jason Price, LAPD detective, and
Right.
his partner Vic Medina, and I have another detective duo in To Die For as well. So I do quite
Oh,
enjoy that
interesting. Okay. Yeah.
body sort of, and I feel sometimes that's a good way to kind of bring humour into the book, to
Yeah.
just bring a bit of lightness to the dark stuff. Sometimes you can bring in a bit of that kind of cop humour. So
Oh no,
yeah,
you do a beautiful job. This like, especially this, and I love this, Sarah's young partner, like doesn't get references to
yeah,
TV shows or, stuff. And she's like, how old are you? And there's this, but also he's not like, he brings stuff to the table. So he's got this, they're a really good, I can see, I mean, that was my first thought is like, okay, well, when's the next, so you're like, oh, now you have to be like, oh shit, that wasn't exactly my plan, but that's, so tell me, like, when you're writing, because you're now like, what is this book, is this for you 8,
the final act is book 7. Yeah.
7? Okay, so like, when you're when you're writing, how, so all your, which is, so let's just back up, because of course I'm like, my mind is in a million places and I always get so excited. So first of all, you set your books in California, which is clearly, as everyone would probably notice from your accent,
Yeah.
not where you live. So tell us, like, sort of, how did you end up Glasgow? There's lots of, I'm sure there's fabulous places there too. So why America? Why California? Did you go there? I mean, like, what? So it all started for you, because Jessica Shaw was your first book. Thin Air was your first book. Yeah. So how did that start?
Yeah, so first of all, I do have family in America. I
Okay.
have family who live in Simi Valley, which is just outside Los Angeles.
Yes.
So I've been able to kind of visit them. But the main reason, well, two reasons. First of all, I kind of like grew up reading American books. I was never kind of interested in Enid Blyton or Agatha Christie and all that kind of stuff. I was more Point Horror, Sweet Valley High,
Yeah.
Dean Koontz, Michael Connelly, all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
the other aspect when it came to writing the debut novel was I just felt the story would work better in
Yep.
America, because it is a story about a private eye who specialises in finding missing people, and then she discovers that she herself has been missing for 25 years, that she
Right.
vanished as a child and had no idea. And I just felt if this was in the UK, she would have come across that story much sooner, because it's a
Right.
smaller sort of landscape. But if you kind of expand it out to America, it felt a bit more realistic that
Yep. Yep.
you could be completely aware of the story that happens on the other side
Oh,
of the country
right.
for
Absolutely.
25 years. So that was kind of one of the reasons. And the other one, just enjoy like American fiction so much. And I kind of went against the write what you know, and went with the write the kind of book that I would want to read
Yeah.
and pick up. So I kind of took a chance. It was a gamble. You don't know how that's going to kind of pan
Right.
out or what the reaction's going to be, but fingers crossed, hopefully it's it's going okay.
Well, it's gone. Are you kidding? You sold 1 million books, Lisa. I think it's going okay. I think it's going to be just. I think you're okay. But I mean, I love the idea also that like it is. You know, there is something about writing something that you don't necessarily know, but that's very interesting to you. That almost is. I mean, I get the write what you know, but I mean, also, I'm not a police. I was never. We were never police officers. We were never like right. We were never detectives. We haven't. You know, we're not. I was never a medical examiner. So for us, the write what you know thing is sometimes like I think we're talking about the emotions of being a human, of being a woman, of being like in our books, in your books, you know, in particular, like the ones, you know, the Jessica Chaucer's, that's about women being, you know, afraid, right, and being put in positions where they're overpowered by men, and in this book too, right? It's so that is, I think, the parts that we know. The rest of it is like, you know, we have to make it up because thank God we don't have the experiences that our characters have had, right?
Yeah, and I always say as well, you make a good point. I've never been a cop. I've definitely never been a serial killer, and you have killers
Right.
in books. And
Right.
sometimes you write from the point of view of the bad guy as well. And I think a big part of the fun is finding out stuff. So you find out what it's like to be a cop in Los Angeles. You find out what it's like to be a private investigator. And for me, that's part of the enjoyment. If whether it's a kind of fictional town or it's a real place in the US, the fun that comes from finding out about that place so that I can hopefully write about it kind of authentically.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, that's, and I think people is, if we do the work, the research and the, you know, and ask the questions of police officers or people in the business, then I think our readers will go there with us. And they love to go there because for them too, it's not what they know, right? But we all read it. I mean, you and I are, I'm sure, as big of readers as we are writers, right? We read the genre, we love the genre. It's so, you know, we're along for the ride for ourselves and also for whoever else is writing those books. So that's so fun. Okay, so tell me, like, what's your process? Like, you know, so and did Thin Air didn't start as a standalone though. You knew that was going to be a series, right?
Yeah, that's
Okay,
right.
okay,
Yeah, I kind
okay.
of pitched that hoping it was going to be a series, and I had the second book kind of in mind what that one was going to be if the book got picked up, and thankfully it did, and that ran for 4 books, and then we
Yeah,
kind of thought maybe it was time to freshen things up a bit and try a standalone. And again, I still have people asking about Jessica Shaw. When are you
yeah.
going to get to Jessica Shaw?
I know. That happens to me
It's,
still. I
yeah.
still get that. But it's funny because Zoom, which is my first book with Thomas and Mercer as part of a series. But then I wrote Whiteout, which was my first book in the next series with Thomas and Mercer as a standalone. But as soon as it was done, they were like, "What's the second book in the series?" And I was like, "What?" Like, you know. But of course, it's. I'm sure you feel the same way about Sarah Delaney. You kind of fall in love with your characters a little bit too.
Yeah.
So the idea of getting to visit them and to learn more about her history and you know her previous relationship and then more about her new partner, it's kind of exciting too, right? You're like, oh, I can see that. I can totally see that.
Yeah, I mean, I could definitely see that could be a relationship I would quite like to get back to with those two detectives again. This all kind of comes down to where your kind of publisher thinks about
Yeah,
things like this. Do they want a series? Do they want to continue standalones? I've just finished next year's book, which is a standalone, so
yeah,
that definitely doesn't have Sarah Delaney. But it's one of those. It's kind of like Jessica Shaw as well. It's like there's no plan on the table at the moment, but never say never because you never know what could
right.
happen. So
And you do you feel like, you know, so you do a book a year. That's sort of, I mean, do you feel like you have I mean, some people are writing like multiple books a year. I mean, I don't know how they do that. I could never do that. But I do feel like there's such a, you know, hunger for your books. Like, you know, have you thought about that?
I think I could probably go a bit more than a book a year. It's just one of those. I think the part of the process it takes the longest for me is the working on the plot, working on the outline,
Mhm.
all the where the chapters are going to go, because I'm definitely a planner. I have to
Okay.
know the ending of the book before I can even write the first word. I have to know how that book ends. And the ending might change, but I need to feel like I know where that book is going to take me and all the
Wow.
kind of stops. along the way. So it's kind of like once I got all that down and I've got my colour-coded post-it notes and index cards with all the chapters, I can actually write quite fast. It's
Yeah.
the thinking that takes
So
time.
I always want, because I'm not a planner. I wish I could plan, but I literally would be, I just, yeah, I don't know what the book is until I started, but I want to talk about that. So like, what's the process if you just get an idea? Like in this case, you thought about this, which is a very, it's obviously a common story in Hollywood, right? A woman comes from, or a man, people come from backgrounds that are nothing related to acting, want to act. And it's, God, that's such a tough existence. So was there like a spark? Is it like, does it come from, something that you see in a newspaper or in a documentary, or is it like just you don't know where it comes from? How do books start for you?
Quite often, the books come from something in real life. Sometimes it could be like a crime, like a true crime, or it could be an interesting newspaper article.
Hmm.
So this one, the spark of the idea did come from quite a well publicised true crime in
Hmm.
America that I can't say what it is
Sure.
because it's going to
Fair.
be a big spoiler for
Yeah,
the
fair.
the book, and people reading the book, they might know the case that I'm talking about
Yeah.
once you kind of know one of
I know that I know the case you're talking about, but I didn't put it together until, yeah,
yeah,
until
because
the
it's
end.
very different. And one of the things, again, without trying to give away too much, in that real case, you thought one thing and then you find out that something else is true.
Hmm.
And what annoyed me is that why there never, it didn't feel like there was an explanation
Right.
for why this thing happened. So I started thinking, okay, if this was a book, why might this happen? And that's where the
Right.
idea,
All the other stuff comes from. That's actually
the
really interesting. I think it's interesting because I think that's part of the writer question is like to understand why, people's motivations for doing things like, and to explore sort of human nature and how people, how the more desperate somebody is, the
yeah,
more they sort of do things that we are like, that's a bad idea. It's fun. It's fun to untangle that and to see people and what people will do if pushed into a corner or okay. So you have this idea, you had the seed of the idea, and then how long does it take you to kind of like, you know, put to extrapolate the story and put together the sort of your outline and your
yeah, that might be maybe a couple of months to
okay.
really nail down the plot. Mostly I have a pretty good sort of like roadmap of where things are going to go, because otherwise I'd be absolutely terrified. And I'm so fascinated by writers like yourself who just kind of maybe have like, I don't know, the start of an idea and then you just see where the book takes you. I find that terrifying.
It is. I mean, I think both are. I mean, they're equally terrifying. I love the idea that you could like know, but I just, yeah, I doesn't my brain. I mean, I wish my brain. I really think what ends up for me is I write. I oftentimes write off in one direction and then realize, oh, I shouldn't have done that. So you go forward a little, 5,000 words, and you're like, oh, that didn't work. So you have to come back and go, So it's sometimes it's yeah. Sometimes you feel like you're wasting time, but I don't know. I mean, I'm whatever 16 books. I don't know how to do it any other way. So if I was smarter, I'd figure it out because it sounds smarter, but it's a process. You just have to kind of, there's a little bit of magic in it, no matter how you do it. And if you don't sort of trust the magic or you try to mess with it, I feel like I'm always worried that I'll like lose it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think you just have to do what works for you. And I think that's the case for anyone who wants to write a book. That aren't really rules. It's do what works for you, because you're saying, oh, maybe I feel like I've wasted that time kind of going down that avenue and then I'm coming back here. But that's the same amount of time that I probably spent staring out the window thinking, where is this plot going to go? Where is
Right,
this going to happen?
right,
So
right.
I think as long as it all works out in the end.
Right, exactly. That's a really good way. Yeah, it's not wasted time, really. I feel like you have to do everything you do to get to the end of the book, whether it's staring out the window or writing 5,000 words that you end up in an out file or whatever else it is. So, Lisa, did you write books before Thin Air? Was that your first?
No, that was the first. So I was a journalist for a long time, as you
Yes.
mentioned. I worked for the Press Association, writing about sport. Then I wrote features for a couple of years, actually, while I was doing the first couple of Jessica Shaw books before I was kind of lucky enough to be able to do that full. So I did a lot of kind of writing, but Thin Air was the first full book that I sat down and wrote, and it took me quite a while to get there. I mean, I went to all these kind of like crime conventions, and I would meet other people who were in the process of writing a book or trying to get an agent, and I kept saying, oh, I'm going to do this one day, I'm going to do this one day, and I put it off and put it off because I think I just had that fear that I was the one that was going to fail while everybody else was kind of moving forward. And so it took me a while to get there, but it was the first.
Well, that's, I mean, it's like, that's so funny. I agree. You're like, it took you a while to get there, but it was also your first book. So it didn't take you that long to get there. But I appreciate what you're saying. What was it like? I mean, sounds like you were a sports journalist. So what was that like to be, was it a lot of women? Was it mixed? Was it mostly men? Like, did you feel, because in your books, I feel like there's a really strong theme of, women being independent and being, able to sort of fend for themselves. Not that there's a sense of like, these are women that obviously respect men and are in relationships with men and friendships with men, but there is a theme of sort of, and I think I love these books, of course, Killer Women. I love the stories where a woman is sufficient to sort of overcome her own fears and her own history. But like, where does that come from for you? Did you have those experiences with your job? I mean, obviously I'm babbling, so you tell us what you think.
Yeah, well, at the time when I was a sports reporter, it was very male dominated. The other like, female reporters were more on the broadcast side, so they would maybe be more TV, radio. I was more the kind of written side, and I think there was only like two others in Scotland that were sort of like more not broadcast, not radio or TV, and it was difficult, and it was a mix. You did get some people who maybe didn't feel that you kind of knew what you were talking about as much as the other guys did, but then you had other ones that were just treated you the same
of course,
as everyone else, and I do think now it's so much better now. It's like the last couple of years, it's so different in terms of them, like female broadcasters, female writers in sport kind of coming through and being taken seriously now. It just came a bit too late for me. But I mean, I've been out of that for like 10 years now. I can't believe that much time has passed since I did that job. So a lot has changed, and I think changed for the good, to be honest.
Yeah. But I mean, so the theme of like sort of, women came, I guess, when we write, I guess this is the part where we sort of write what we know, right? Of course, we're going to write about strong women and women in police. And I feel like everybody, even the men now, write about strong women in police, right? We have all these, I mean, they're like Bob Dugotti is a great example, such an amazing author. And he's got that whole series of books that are, Tracy Crosswhite, and she's a, detective in Washington. So, but I think it is like, I don't know if when you start a book, if you sort of intend to explore sort of, because a lot of these stories are about sort of survival, like what Jessica Shaw went through, what Madison James goes through, what, the other women in this book go through, or if it's just sort of the way the story develops, it becomes, the women are just at the center of it because of who you are.
Yeah, and I think that is something that you kind of touched on in terms of the kind of survival aspect. So Madison James is the missing woman in this story, and she goes through quite a lot of really bad stuff early on in her career, and I felt that was important to kind of show. I think I had to kind of touch on the Me Too thing. I didn't set out to write a book about the Me Too movement.
No, of course.
I also felt it would be remiss to write a book that was set in that time period and not acknowledge what a lot of young actors went through at that time. But I also felt it was quite important to show the strength that she had to kind of come through this. And even 2 decades later, despite all the knocks that she's had, she's still not to give up on this dream that she feels she deserves. And she didn't deserve the things that happened back then, and she's still going to fight for that dream, kind of show that she is a survivor in that industry, even though it's an industry that hasn't treated her very well at times.
Right. It's
But
a
it was,
hard industry. I mean,
yeah,
but like we think I think writing sometimes is hard, and I'm like, you have to. It's not they're not dissimilar, right? You have to fight to continue to be a writer. You have to, you have to work really hard. You have to do, but acting, like I can't even. I mean, I can't imagine. So, but we have that. I mean, I think you published your first book and you worked towards it and you fought it. We have a little bit of that sort of like determination to do this thing that's hard that not many people can do. So of course that also shows up on the page, and I love that because I think one of the lessons that we all need, not just women, but maybe particularly women, is resilience. Like you have to, if you really want something, you have to just, you can't quit, right? It's not going to, I mean, very few things in life are going to come sort of easily, right? I mean, the things that we all want the most are going to take a shit ton of work, and we're going to get knocked down. I mean, I don't know about you, but I have like a stack. My first book came out in 2000, so I've been doing this for a while, but I have a stack of rejection letters, some of them kind of mean rejection letters, in my file folder, which I kind of now think of as a badge of honor, right? Like this is how many times I got knocked down and got back up and said, no matter what you say, I'm going to still do it. So,
yeah. And it is that one, even though I was like really fortunate that I got a publishing deal with the first book I wrote. I mean, there was a lot of rejections in there as
yes.
well. It's just that you just need that one yes.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
that's the thing. But I mean, there was a lot of rejections, and as you say, I mean, I don't think any of them were really kind of nasty, but sometimes the generic ones kind of hurt the most.
Yeah.
Where
Yeah.
it's kind of don't even bother to kind of go into.
Yes.
We didn't feel this was right for us, or you kind of
Yeah.
wondered, did they read it, or did they just think?
Right. Right. You're like, how much time did you really give it? Right. It's so true. It's so true. Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about next year's book, or is you're not like, I totally respect some people are like, no, and some people are like, I can give you a little.
Yeah, I think I can give the sort of basic premise. I think that's okay. So the working title is Dead of Night, and it's about a best-selling mystery author who has had a traumatic experience in her personal life, and she's really struggling to work on the next book. But she writes this like really famous like best-selling series, and the fans are clamoring for the next book, and she's struggling. So she's based in New York, in Manhattan, and she decides to rent a beach house in Southern California for the summer, change of scenery, thinking I can use this as a kind of retreat to work on.
Right.
And when she gets there, she discovers that in that same house, 3 decades earlier, a family disappeared under mysterious circumstances. So it was like the dinner was out in the worktop, the laundry was in the machine, the car's on the driveway, the lights are on, the front door was unlocked, all the belongings were still there, but they were just gone, and no
Oh,
one has ever figured out in those last 3 decades what happened. So her being someone who's very involved in mysteries becomes
it
involved in
sounds
finding out.
that sounds
Very
so
strange
fun.
things start happening in and around this house as well. So that's kind of like the basic premise. I think it's okay to share that much as I
Yeah,
say.
no, I love that idea. That I can't wait for that. That sounds so exciting. So Lisa, tell our listeners where to find you online. I know you're on Instagram because we follow each other there. What's your Instagram handle? Is it,
Yeah, it's
you
Lisa
know?
Gray Writer.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
and that's the
then
one on Facebook and Twitter
okay.
/X.
Okay. This is so exciting. So this comes out when the release date of this is.
It's July 1st.
Okay,
So
so that's exciting. So we're gonna air this actually on July 4th. So right now, if you're listening to this, Lisa's book is already available, and you can go and get yourself a copy. It's super exciting, Lisa. It's such a fun book. Your books are you know, your books are so, this is something I felt from thin air, is that you do two things that I think are really hard to do together. One is that we really get to know your characters, so you don't feel like, it doesn't feel like, you know, it's this sort of surface. It feels like they're they've got depth and they've got dimension, and yet the pace is also still really fast, and I think that's something that is really hard to balance. So I maybe need to study them a little bit more closely for my own work. But I always love reading a Lisa Gray book. And for those of you who are just new to Lisa Gray, which it seems like that's impossible, but if you haven't, that you know, once you've read the final act, go back and read the Jessica Shaw series, and then the other two standalones, because you won't be sorry. So
Thank you.
So everybody, this was Killer Women with Lisa Gray. It was so fun to see you, Lisa. I really hope you'll be at Thriller Fest next year. I'll just keep my fingers crossed. And for everybody else, we will see you next time. Bye.
Bye.